So this is the beautiful little cemetery at Clyde Forks, which is a small hamlet not far from Perth, Ontario, not far from Ottawa. And at one point it was on the famous Kingston to Pembroke Railway, the Kick and Push Railway, which of course is long gone. Some of the bridges remain and a few of the where the tracks were remains, but everything else is gone. So this was quite a hopping place back in 1914. And this cemetery, of course, holds some of the burials of the early pioneers and settlers and the lumbermen. But what's more interesting to me is on these little columns in front of the cemetery are plaques commemorating men who fought and died in the Second World War and the First World War. And one of those killed was Alexander Caldwell. For decades, Alexander Caldwell was commemorated on a plaque here on one of the columns. But recently, that plaque has gone missing. Normally, we could look at his name and tell his story, but it's gone. Someone's stolen it, it's broken. I don't know what's happened to it. But there are other ways we can piece his story together, and that means talking to the collectors. This is a burial card or a service card that you produced to honor him with the black edges. Can you just read that?
In loving memory of Private Alexander M. Caldwell, who died for King and Country at Rouen, France, on November the 24th, 1916, aged 23 years.
So Gary, you've picked up one of the most interesting commemorative groups from the First World War that I've ever seen. Can you explain to me what you found and who this Alexander Caldwell is?
Yeah, Alexander Caldwell, he was originally from Ontario, from a place called Caldwell Mills, Ontario. His family were in the lumbering business. He enlisted originally in the 56th Battalion in Calgary. The reason he was out in Western Canada, he worked for a company out there, Dominion Express Company. When the battalion moved overseas, when they got to England, Caldwell was put into the 50th Battalion, which is one of the fighting battalions. And on their first engagement, their first action of the war, the 50th Battalion at the Battle of the Somme, late in November, he was seriously wounded in a shot through the hip and fell into a shell hole. We laid for 3 days, and bearing in mind that in November in that part of France, it's not unlike Canada, it's cold. And they found him 3 days later, and by that time he had developed gangrene in his wounds, and he had frostbite in both feet and his hands. He was relocated to a field hospital in Rouen, where he finally succumbed to his wounds and died on the 24th of November, 1916.
And this is his oval portrait that the family would have had done during the war with the patriotic frame?
Yeah.
So this is something that's very unique.
Yeah, there's even a smaller picture of him, which I have of him there. And apparently that picture is of him when he was about 16 or 17 years old. So you can...
Oh yeah, he's in his, with the high collar. He's got the high collar and the little tie.
Yeah.
And this is a unique piece.
Yeah, he would have been 16 or 17 at that time. There's several letters here that he wrote when he first enlisted. They had the logo on them of the 56th Battalion, which is the original unit that he joined. So he's writing to his sister, Aphie, and he's writing to his mother in various correspondence. They actually kept the envelopes that these things came in.
Who do you think kept them? Do you think the sister?
No, I would think it's his mother. That's just my speculation. It's just amazing that they didn't throw anything out which was connected to him.
You have these amazing letters, particularly the ones from the nursing sisters to the family while he's suffering before he dies. Can you read this one?
Yeah, this one is dated the 22nd of November, 1916, so this would be 2 days before he died. And this is written to his mother, and it's number 11 Stationary Hospital, 22nd of November, 1916. Dear Madam, I much regret to have to inform you that your son, 447289 Private A. Caldwell, 50th Canadians, has been admitted into this hospital badly suffering from a gunshot wound of the thigh. Also frostbite of both feet. His hands are also frostbitten. He is dangerously ill, but is very bright and happy, and was pleased when I told him I could write you. You may rest assured that everything possible will be done for him, and I will keep you informed as to his progress. Yours faithfully, Margaret S. Riddell, matron. One of the nurses even sent pictures of them. They really looked after him, and they wrote personal letters to his mother. This is the original telegram notifying his mother.
Mrs. Ellen Caldwell, Caldwell Mills, Ontario. Deeply regret inform you cable received today states Private Alexander Caldwell, infantry, now officially reported died of wounds November 24th, 1916. It says here it was received at Perth, Ontario, Sunday, November 28th. And then it says phone to Caldwell's Mills. But we can barely find these places today. It was strictly a postal station in the 1880s, and then afterwards it was eliminated and it reverted to the name of Clyde Forks,
Yes.
in the Lanark Highlands.
Another thing was interesting with this guy is his mother had sent a package to him, which was not uncommon in the First War. Next of kin or family's mother sent them foods, packages and stuff. Well, it was received by the men from his platoon. By this time he had died of his wounds. So of course they opened up the package and divvied it up among his comrades, his fellow soldiers. And, it was a corporal in his platoon wrote a letter to his mother, which I have the original letter, saying that what a fine soldier he was and a good comrade and so on, and that they missed him. The soldier's name was Young. He was a corporal in the 50th Battalion. The irony of it is Young was, several months later, was killed at Vimy Ridge. And he has no known grave, and his name is on the Vimy Memorial.
This is another one that comes 2 days later. I am deeply grieved to have to inform you that your son passed away this morning at 3:30. He had no idea he was so critically ill, but he had lain for 3 days in the shell hole full of water, and both his feet were quite gangrenous. It may be some slight comfort to you to know that he was cared for and nursed during his short time of pain. About an hour before he died, he said, "You'll write and tell my mother that I'm going to be fine." He will be buried tomorrow with full military honors in the Saint Sever Cemetery, which lies near the hospital. The graves are beautifully kept, and everything done to honor the brave lads who had given their lives for the Empire. An oak cross is erected over each grave, bearing the rank, name, and regiment of the soldier, so it will be quite easy to find a grave at a future time. Please accept my expression of sincere sympathy for you in the loss of such a brave son, and believe me, yours sincerely, Margaret S. Riddell, matron. Now in the original, you can see there's the photograph of the nurses and the poppies. The poppy would be from, I would assume, the graves at Saint Sever. So this actually survives from the grave, but there's something else that survives from the original grave, Gary.
I actually have the cross that was on his grave. This would be the actual cross that's shown in the picture that was on his grave. There's documentation here that the family had requested it, which you had to have a request for the wooden cross by September 1920, I believe, was the date. As the crosses were removed from the graves and replaced with the permanent stone markers, the cross would have been sent out to the next of kin, whoever requested it. In this case, it's his mother.
So this is quite unusual. Now, when the Imperial War Graves Commission took over, they would not allow any repatriation of the bodies. So no one could go home. So they made a couple of deals to try to make it easier for the families far afield. And one of them was they could request the wooden crosses. So it's very, very unusual to see these crosses. First of all, not many were brought back, and a lot of them were later actually cremated, literally, and their ashes spread on the battlefields in France. So this one has never been opened. That's incredible.
To my knowledge, it's the only one known that's never been opened.
Just amazing. It's almost like they asked for it, and then almost they couldn't touch it.
Yeah.
Like the grief is so powerful. And for these mothers, like we don't think about the mothers and the people left at home, but it's got to be just, this grief must have lasted for generations.
Oh yeah, yeah. You could tell even by the correspondence and the family and everything, how they would have, really suffered with the loss of this man. It's tragic. And I'd like to say that this cross will never be opened, as far as I'm concerned. This will never be unpacked. It'll be like it is, and that's it.
Tell me why.
Well, I think that it's part of history, that this is how they packaged them up. This is how they sent them. There's nobody alive today that sent these things out.
Isn't it like a sacrilege to the family if you were to open it?
I would think so. They didn't want it opened, so I'm not going to do it.
And today, what I find interesting, like, is that you're connecting to this past through this artifact, through this story. How do you feel about that?
So I think it has to be kept together, and I think it has to be preserved as part of our heritage, part of our. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's like this guy came home. Here he is here.
Yeah.